Poppy Playtime Chapter 5 came out recently, and in it a lot of mysteries about the game were solved, like what the prototype looks like and what his backstory is, whether Harley Sawyer is alive, if there is a Chapter 6, and much more. But Chapter 5 also left a lot of mysteries waiting to be solved, like if the Doctor is an ally in Chapter 6, who we are playing as, and most importantly, how we even survived getting impaled by the prototype and potentially nearly drowning in a vat of poppy gel. I have seen a lot of people trying to solve this exact question, but there's one thing about this whole cutscene that I think could be the groundwork to solving this mystery, something that connects everything together and something that many people gloss over when talking about this scene. So in this video, I'll be going over how the player survived being stabbed by the prototype, and how that solves one of Poppy Playtime's biggest mysteries since Chapter 1. It's very clear by now that the player has some sort of supernatural or unhuman-like ability to avoid death at any given point where they should have genuinely died, like falling headfirst into large rocks from a great height in Chapter 4, and even surviving a whole train crash that ended in a fire in Chapter 2. But what could it be? Is the player not even a human but a toy or some other sort of immortal entity? Maybe, maybe not. Is it the poppy gel that revived the player? Now we're getting there. But there's something in this scene that I think holds the real answer. Did you get it? Well, it's the death screen, specifically a version where they say, "We still need you, get up." This screen has been a huge mystery in Poppy Playtime for years now. They always show very cryptic messages like someone's trying to communicate to us, refusing to let us die before we finish some sort of mission. For years, people have been trying to figure out who is communicating these messages to us, what exactly they want from the player, and why they seem to always know what exactly we're doing. Anyways, despite their importance, they didn't seem to be that big of an aspect of the game and could have been brushed off as some cool death screens giving us lore while we wait to respawn. This was mainly because we don't actually die before the Chapter 5 ending scene, so someone can go through the whole game without seeing it. But now that it's in a mandatory cutscene, it seems like these death screens are officially canonized. And yes, I say that we actually died in Chapter 5 because the death screens don't show up unless we die. Every other fatal injury the player got, the screen didn't show up. So it's not that the player is immortal, it's that the poppy gel brought them back to life here. Now, the question of who is communicating to the player is more relevant than it has ever been, since this mysterious communicator has a huge role in the story for ensuring our survival in Chapter 5. So now we have to try to figure out who this is. Who exactly has been refusing our death throughout the game? Based on the death screens we've gotten so far, this communicator has a very strong resemblance to Poppy, where they repeat exact lines Poppy said before, such as "you're too perfect to lose," or even has lines based on what Poppy said or wishes for, like revenge or burning the factory to the ground. But there's a bit of a problem. There's many other lines that don't sound like Poppy at all. There's lines that glaze the prototype and talks about how cool innovation and science is. There's really only one person this could possibly be, and that's the prototype himself. We know by now that he is so full of himself. When he was communicating to us as Ollie, his real identity, he was praising the prototype for everything, from being a superhero to catnap to being absolutely terrifying. There's one major difference between the prototypes and Poppy's lines in these death screens. Poppy's lines urges us to get up while the prototype doesn't. In this canon scene where the player dies, we see one of the get up lines, which can only mean that it's Poppy communicating to us here and being our angel this time, not letting us die and ensuring our survival like the death screens have been doing this whole time. But how could Poppy be the one bringing us back to life? She's being taken by the prototype after all, so she wasn't even there when the player died. Or remember how I mentioned that the other messages seem to be coming from the prototype? Well, what do Poppy, the prototype, and our supposed place of death have in common? That's right, the poppy gel. The prototype and Poppy were both made from the poppy gel, created by Elliot Ludwig to bring his daughter, Poppy, back from the dead in the form of a doll and tested it on his son, Ollie, to see if it worked on a human before bringing Poppy back. So maybe, the poppy gel gives anyone who's been brought to life by it the ability to see each other's thoughts. Poppy knows this and has been using it to her advantage to communicate to us that we can't die and the prototype is just rambling about science. As the death screens weren't what canonically respawned us before being placed in the vat of poppy gel, The death screens before this point could just be foreshadowing of what's to come. Foreshadowing that the player will actually die at some point, then be resurrected by the Poppy gel, just like Poppy and the prototype were. But there's an elephant in the room that I need to address. In many of these death screen messages, it's implied that there's a third person that could be talking to us. Or should I say a group of people? Because a good handful of these messages talk about a we and us. A lot of these could just be coming from Poppy since she uses these words when referring to what she wants on behalf of others like Kissy or the late Safe Haven members. But could it be coming from the orphans? Now I know it's implied in chapter 5 that the orphans are dead, but the only proof of that comes from this line.
I did
what I had to.
They're
In a better place now.
It said that they're in a better place now. But where else in this chapter have we heard about a better place? Have a listen to what the prototype says in this tape during his first moments as the prototype after being transformed from Ollie.
It was never about me, never about my better place.
Poppy has her better place, and Poppy is alive, brought back as a living Poppy doll, through the Poppy gel. So I don't think that the better place the prototype was referring to is death, but he had already transformed the surviving orphans into experiments using the Poppy gel that brought himself, Poppy, and now the player back to life. It's even capitalised in the captions in the tea party scene, making it a noun and not an adjective. So it can only be an actual thing in this game, and not a metaphor for death. Another place we hear about this better place is through yet another death screen, this time for chapter 5. It comes from one of the prototype's potential messages, where he says, "It can be real for us, a better place." So clearly he is obsessed with this better place, and that better place is connected to science and his goals. So now it makes no sense that the prototype killed the orphans and left them for dead. The hints are right there that they're still alive. But how does this relate to the player being brought back to life? Well, in the death screen we got in this cutscene, it talks about a we, so multiple people who still need the player alive, not just Poppy. Even Disguised Ollie said something almost identical to this when talking about his and Poppy's mission to save the orphans. Now, we have two main candidates for who it is that urged us from the brink of death to stay alive, Poppy and one of the orphans. But who was it? On one hand, there's multiple orphans who might still be alive thanks to the Poppy gel, but still want rescuing from the prototype, so they talk to us through the Poppy gel from wherever they're trapped. But on the other hand, we know that Poppy was brought to life with the Poppy gel, and all the death screen messages that could be from the orphans could also just be from Poppy. For now, I'm going to say that I think it was Poppy at this scene because I think that there's more proof of her there. And it would make sense for the story right now because of how close the player and Poppy are. The player was Poppy's angel, but in this scene, Poppy is their angel. So to put everything simply, I think that the death screens shown throughout the game were foreshadowing that we would eventually actually die and be given another chance at life through the Poppy gel, since the death screen canonically shows up in that mandatory scene and we technically didn't die once throughout the game. So it's not that the player just survived after being stabbed by the prototype, but they were brought back to life with the Poppy gel. The secret to a better place. The main two people we know who seem to show up in these death screens in the past are Poppy and the prototype, both who were brought back to life with the Poppy gel. Since many of the death screens with Get Up seem to be coming from Poppy, it might have been through Poppy's motivation through the gel, as well as the gel's properties, that brought us back to life. But it could have been the orphans with us at this scene and not Poppy. It's all thanks to Poppy, or whoever this mysterious communicator is, and the Poppy gel that the player is alive. But this is all still very new information that happened within the last couple of minutes of chapter 5. So it will be very interesting to see what happens in chapter 6 now that the player is infused with the Poppy gel and Poppy somehow stepped in before their death to inform them that they won't be dying despite not being physically there at the moment. But what do you all think? Is the death screen important to this scene in chapter 5, or was it just a cool throwback to all the death screens we've gotten so far? Was it Poppy who was with us at this scene, or was it someone else? Or is it simply a hallucination from the player? Whatever it may be, I hope we get an answer to all of this in chapter 6.